It's week 11 and I'm going to talk about Photoshop for authors. So writing a history book means that you're bound to have photos to include in the book. A lot of those will come from sources that are going to be in their rawest form, meaning that it's going to be a slide or a photo that you yourself can scan, or even maybe some of the institutions that hold that item may scan it for you. And I talk about scanning in another video where I talk about trying to get the highest resolution possible in an uncompressed format, which is going to be a TIFF file. So the question comes then when you get to the point where you're going to edit this photo, or I guess include the photo in the book. You've made your selection of 100 photos for your book. Can you count on the editor to edit them? And in my previous experience with my first and only book, the answer is no. So thankfully I'd spent some time editing it. What they didn't do was edit it for the final product, meaning that initially we thought that more photos would be color. They ended up being black and white, and we anticipated it to be printed on white paper and ended up being printed on a cream paper, which sounds like a minor detail. But what that meant was that photos that looked good on a clear white background looked muddied and dark and lost a lot of the contrast and definition on the final product, which we didn't realize until we literally got the book in hand, and that was very disappointing. So if we had known that, or if I had known that before, I would have edited the photos appropriately. So lesson learned, don't always trust the publisher to do that. So anyway, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that I go through with editing photos. So I talk about scanning in the other one, so I'm going to go from, I don't have one on hand, go from taking a slide here, you can almost see it there, taking this slide from start to finish through the process. So here we go. So the two main tools in Photoshop that I use are the healing brush, and then there's the clone stamp tool. Healing brush is for most of it. J is the shortcut, and what it does is that I use content aware feature, which is up here at the top. There's a couple of other options, proximity match, but content aware is a little bit smarter for, or has a smarter feature for photos, in that it tries to mimic the surrounding area. So if there's a texture or even kind of an object, it'll try to mimic that object if you're trying to eliminate something. So if there's a spot, and so I kind of have this demonstration here. So you have spots that you want to remove that are kind of filler. You can just kind of, brush over it, and then again, it's going to check the surrounding area for what you want to replace it with. It does a pretty good job of that. Now you may find something where it's really close to an object that you want to keep, and let's say that didn't really work. Let me say this, and it turns out it's just hard to get rid of. And so that's where the stamp tool, or clone stamp tool as it is, comes in useful. And what it does, or allows you to do, is select a set area. So usually alternate, and it gives you a little target. You click, and then now it's going to replicate or clone that area wherever you click. So in this case, I can make it a little bit bigger here, and I can replace the section and get rid of that dot that I don't want. So they both kind of have their own place. Again, I kind of find that the clone one, the spot healing brush is the most useful with it. It's pretty straightforward. You kind of go over stuff. Boop. But again, it has its limitations here, like trying to get rid of the end of an object, because it's with its logic, it's trying to maintain or preserve a certain shape. So you'll have to find out what works best for your scenario. So anyways, this is one of those things you just kind of want to play with. So the photo that I scanned here, I'll bring it in. I got two, I don't want that one. Here's the one I have. So the scan is actually pretty good. So the first thing that I do is I look at the levels. of the photo. So this is the levels panel. The box here with like the histogram is the input level, so it's basically what the photo has in it already. And what it does is the darkest colors are on the left and the lightest are on the right. So you can see there's a gap in the darkest colors. So as I move that to the right, nothing actually changes because there's no data being lost there. But as you go into the actual histogram, now you can start seeing that it's making some of those colors now black. Basically, it's going to shift where the black falls. So more and more things are going to be black. So obviously I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to kind of bring it up till it just kind of touches the edge of that histogram. And the same would be true for the white, but I'm kind of already at the end of the whites. There's a big spike there because a big portion of the photo is very bright. So I'm just going to kind of leave that at the end. Now something else you can do, you can use, they have these little eyedroppers, and what that allows you to do is pick on the photo what you want the darkest to be. In this case, because I have the black one, and let's say underneath this bus is the darkest spot, and it's now going to adjust the histogram as compared to that dark color. You can do the same thing with the gray and kind of find like an average gray. And actually this sidewalk's a pretty good average gray. And we'll click that, and actually that looks pretty good. In fact, you can see how it even changed the color as I kind of turn off the preview. The other one's a little bit washed out, a little bit more blue, and we have an increased green, maybe a little bit too much green, but we can fix that another way. So that's a pretty good start. I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that. I'm going to hit OK. So the next thing would be color. There is an auto color. A lot of these features have auto versions, and to be honest, you can always start with that and see what it gives you. And actually didn't seem to change anything by doing that. Again, it still feels a little bit too green. The shadows here in the middle have a little bit of green. So you can go to adjustments and you can do color balance. And midtones is kind of the bulk, the center of the photo. So usually start with that and maybe just add a little bit of red to it. And if you can't tell the difference, you can kind of cycle the preview on and off. And that reduced a little bit of it. And there's a lot of blue in this one too, so maybe one of the things to play with the blue and bring it up a little bit more too, and kind of make the livery of the bus a little bit more rich, more of a rich blue color. And it may be subtle, I don't know if you can even tell in the video, but anyway, that there is a noticeable improvement on my end here. And the cyan color, it doesn't actually seem too bad. What we do is you can always drag it to the worst and see what's going to change either direction, and then find a happy spot in the middle. Yeah, that's pretty good. So again, if the deep parts, like the shadows, so I still feel like there's maybe a little bit too much green, again, you can kind of take that out, go into the shadows mode, and maybe bring a little bit of that down, add a smidgen of red to it, maybe check the blue, so a little more dark blue there. There we go. Yeah. Anyway, so you kind of just keep playing with that. I'm not going to go too much into it because there's more just explanation of what I play with than actually what the final solution will be for this. And then once I'm kind of happy with the overall color of the photo and the highlights and whatnot, that's when I'm going to start doing the cleanup work. So if I zoom in, you can see the sky is just littered with imperfections, things that some may have come from the scan, but to be honest, it's a 40-year-old slide that I scanned it from, so it's just going to have kind of junk on it. Even if you try to clean it off, some things are kind of stuck to it. So this is what I'm going to try to clean up. So again, just using the spot healing brush tool, which looks like a little band-aid, and this is all it is. So you don't want too big of one, because if you go too big, again, it's going to look at the surrounding area and try to come up with a pattern, and that pattern may include, I worked there, but may include some of the other imperfections and bring those in and kind of double them up. So you don't want to be too much bigger than the spots actually that you're removing to retain the most amount of the original photo. So that's that. So I'm going to kind of just go through here and clean this up to the best of my ability and just get rid of much of the dust. So the front of the bust on this part here seems to have some imperfections in it, and initially maybe you'll think that it's maybe it, in this case does come from a scan, but I'm more likely to believe that this is actually an actual imperfection with the bust. So ideally, it'd be nice to have a crystal clear picture of a bust with no imperfections. But the reality is, these are vehicles of the road, and they encounter wear and tear. And so by removing that, obviously that would change the reality of the situation or the time period. So stuff like that, you kind of want to leave that in. But small things, again, like little hairs and stuff that have got into the scan, you can easily remove those. So that's really ultimately the goal here, is we're trying to, again, make this the most accurate representation of the actual photo that was taken, and just kind of get rid of any incidentals that happen to show up due to time and wear and tear. So you really don't want to take away too much, and you don't want to add anything new into that. So, one thing that I found is probably the most, regarding this story, or at least Kent State, the most infamous case of this is this famous photo of Mary Vecchio. Is that her name? I can't remember offhand, but anyway, leaning over the slain body of Jeffrey Miller at the Kent State students on May 4th. And the photo on the right is the original photo, and you'll see here that there's a pole that's sticking out of the top of her head that just happened to be there when they took the photo. And on the left photo, which is from a Life magazine or Time magazine, they edited it out. They felt it was too distracting, so they opted to take it out, which, well, that isn't true. I mean, that was there. And so we're not trying to make the photo more accurate, we're changing something because it is more pleasing to the eye. So again, historically, why would you do that? And obviously thanks to Photoshop, I mean, it's just as easy as swiping over it, oops, and it's gone. And actually it's a slightly better job than when they left a little dark blivet there at the top of that. But again, where would it end? Like, oh, this guy's too distracting, you just take him out, or this, or even the blood that's pooling behind her. No, that's not the intent of an author photoshopping or editing their photos. Again, we're trying to make it the most accurate representation of what the photo captured with that. So back to the bust photo. Yeah, this looks great. Now, reality, I might spend a little more time with the color correction to try to get it the most accurate as I can. But yeah, this is actually pretty close. I probably wouldn't be too disappointed with that. The other thing to add with that, if the photo ends up being black and white, which color costs more, so a publisher may be more inclined to print more photos if they're black and white, I would highly recommend then doing your editing in black and white. That's as simple as changing the mode into a grayscale. And then this way, it's going to be, again, you have a better idea of how it's going to reproduce when it's on print. And as we found, again, it depends what kind of papers are going to be printed on. That would be a big question too. And if they're going to print on something that wasn't, a white paper, kind of like, like a piece of printer paper, then I would like to see how it would print. If they weren't willing to do the work themselves, like, could I at least get a sample of the paper, something that I can print on my end to see how is it going to react to being on that type of coloring? Because again, the photo has some color. Well, that color is going to be multiplied or added to the picture you put on top. So the darks will be darker, the grays will be grayer. You kind of want the photo overexposed, a little bit too white or too bright. I'm sorry. And then this one is when it's on kind of a miscolored paper that it's going to show more accurately. And that would just be done through looking at like a brightness and contrast and just basically just turning the brightness up a bit. Now, a bit, not too much, but so that would be a caution when it comes to having your photos reproduced in a book, is making sure that in fact they are going to come across again more accurate. Put all this work into the editing and making it as accurate as possible. You want the final product to reflect that. So again, so just don't add anything. Just look for scratches. If you can't remove the scratch, or whatever the imperfection is through the different methods that an editing software may offer, just leave it. I would rather have a photo with a big gouge in a corner or something like that, because again, at least that's accurate, it's true to the photo, but I would also not want it to, me edit it and I end up some sort of weird thing that may or not been there. So, draw a line somewhere. We don't go too far into trying to have this perfect photo, because obviously that's not going to happen unless, you're taking it with modern equipment in present day. Yeah, and if you have any questions about that would be something to give the publisher. How much work are they going to do on your photos? What kind of paper are you going to use? Can you be a part of kind of the proofing of that? That was a big regret that we had. We were not involved with any of the proofing on our photos, which meant that we ended up having a subpar product, and we literally didn't know until it came into print, and then we saw it and we were like, wow, that's awful, and we weren't given any heads up. So, well, lesson learned on that. So that's kind of a summary of my experience previously that I had with a book and the photos not necessarily being edited properly, and thankfully I had spent some time going in, but this is something you can easily do. You're probably going to be willing to put more time in than any publisher will ever put into your photos, and you only get one shot at this. You want to make sure that they're in the best quality that you can have for that final presentation. So I guess the one last thing I would add, I just remember I had a little note here, is that if you end up doing a lot of editing, maybe there's just one photo that, despite it being completely, miscolored or, a lot of damage, and you edit all of it back out, that put that in the notes or put that in the caption of the photo and just say that this is a photoshopped or edited photo with that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because you're being honest to the reader that there may be some artistic interpretation on the version that they're looking at. And I can appreciate that. I mean, if there's some old photo, sometimes it's kind of neat seeing it color corrected. Or if it's a black and white photo, some people even go as far as coloring the black and white photo. Some people are really good at that. It's amazing. So as long as that's included in the caption, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So, and that's kind of where I'm at. I've kind of already done all my scanning. I'm not really going to spend too much time doing editing because I don't know what's going to make the final cut. So at this point, why invest the time? But there's some that I'm really sure are, on the final selection list. So I've put the time in now. Plus I kind of find it enjoyable, so I don't mind putting the time in. So anyway, that's it for week 11. Next week is week 12, so that'll be the conclusion of month 3 in this process. We are still in the beginning stages of the coronavirus, so that's impacting everything in the world, including the ability to put together a book. So we'll see where this happens, or where this goes, if this actually happens. So anyway, that's it for week 11. On to week 12. Bye now.